Hello, I am Professor Zaldivar, and this is a brief introduction to John Dewey's essay, The Value of Philosophy to Society. This essay is a very nice example of how um, unnecessarily complex language in a philosophical essay can hide a very straightforward message. When you are reading this essay, it will be very important for you to read it slowly and carefully, and for you to pause and think about what the meaning of each sentence is, rather than get lost in the rather unconventional structure or overly complex grammar or overly sophisticated word choice. That said, I think it's a very nicely written essay, and it has a very interesting message. Dewey begins the essay by discussing what philosophy and education are. And he does this in order to make the point that philosophy is intimately related to education. In fact, at one point he says philosophy might be defined as a general theory of education. And one might wonder, what does that mean? So why is philosophy intimately related to education? That's a very good question, and of course, he proceeds to answer it as best he can. He points out that philosophy, which is to say, asking philosophical questions and answering those questions using philosophical tools of things like conceptual analysis, is how we educate ourselves. More specifically, it's how we educate ourselves with respect to certain important and very complex social problems. In fact, education, Dewey argues, is how we address our problems. Problems such as equality of genders, equality of races, the value of democracy, the value of capitalism, the value of private property rights, the balance between property rights and autonomy, etc., etc., etc. All of these fundamental problems, problems which are ingrained in any society, and specifically ingrained in a society, a democratic capitalist society like ours, are important and need to be addressed. And the way we address these problems is through philosophical work. So, a straightforward answer to Dewey's concern over the value of philosophy to society is simply to say that philosophy is how we solve our problems. His grounding for this claim is taken from the model of philosophy practiced by the ancient Greeks, such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. For these ancient Greeks, philosophy was uh, mostly concerned with ethical behavior and with social justice. So to them, a philosophical education is an education in how to live, and preferably, of course, an education in how to have a happy and a good life. And in fact, when you see the writings of Plato and Aristotle and the commentary of Socrates, they are over and over and over again concerned with what it takes to have a good life, with what a good life is, and with how we acquire one. What sort of person ought we to be, uh, such that we are very likely to have a good life? Given that historical background to the origins of philosophy and the continued inclusion of ethics and moral thinking as a central problem in philosophy, we can see that where Dewey's conception of the value of philosophy comes from. Quite simply, without philosophers and without philosophy, we could not solve these central and difficult problems in our social structures. So it's in the end, as I mentioned at the beginning of this short video, it is a really basic, straightforward story. Of course, there are twists and turns within the essay, and I encourage you, in fact, you're required to read the whole essay, and I encourage you to think about it, spend some time thinking about it, and of course, answer the reading questions so that when we come to class, or discuss it as a class, you have some insights and some reflective material, some insight and reflections to share with all of us. Thank you again for listening. And this has been Professor Zaldivar discussing John Dewey's essay on the value of philosophy to society.